Well, Sanko's Thabo Matau also joins us now on the phone line. Very good morning to you, sir, and thank you for joining us here on ANN7. Let's first get your views also on these workers that will be losing their jobs at the end of the month, seeing that the judgment was handed down today.
A very good morning to you and your viewers at home. And indeed, today is a very sad day in the history of South Africa. And we are deeply worried about this judgment, because this judgment does not only have implications for the workers only, but also has implications for communities and those who are already unemployed. Look, in the region where we are, in the Highveld region in Kangala, majority of the people who are going to be affected are residing within our region. We have said in the past the community of Henrina relies on water that they are getting from Optimum. Now, what it means is that with this decision, all the issues that we have been raising, they have not been taken into consideration. But where we are sitting, our view is that we have indeed marched to the banks, and we have given them 7 days to respond to this situation. So we'll obviously go back and widely consult on the way forward, because it is indeed a worrying factor. When you have just had the poverty statistics that came out, it means now we are going to have over 7,500 to 8,500 people who are going to be joining those who are unemployed. What is even worrying is that that mine is not because the mine must shut down because coal are not there. Not because these people are going, they are retrenched because there's no coal to mine anymore. Coal is there. It is a matter of differences which we have all been following. It is a worrying factor we are sitting. Look, man, there are convicted criminals who are sitting in jail today, who continue to have their bank accounts open.
Let's just get maybe your plans for how you will go about maybe taking action against the Bank of Baroda, perhaps trying to let them keep the accounts open in the light of this interdict being lost.
Look, I think we have, when we marched jointly, the workers and communities, what we have said is that, look, after 7 days, and we mean that, after 7 days, if the response is not favorable, if these accounts are not open, for the sake of the workers and for the sake of the communities like the community of Henrina, we are going to be marching to these banks on a daily basis. Because where we are sitting, where must these people wake up to, and what they must wake up and do on a daily basis. So you are going to have all these people who are unemployed. Our view is that we should join hands with the NUM, SANCO, and all other structures which are affected. Mobilize these workers, mobilize their families, and take them to these branches until something is done. Because we feel that this is unfair. Just because of a vendetta and a political agenda against one family. These people are sentenced to poverty because they happen to work for Oakbay, who happen to have majority shareholders, who happens to be the Gupta family. We feel that the people should not be subjected to what they are subjected to.
Well, please stay with us on the phone line. We do have another phone call on the line. It is political commentator Jackie Ishandu joining us now. Very good morning to you, and thank you for joining us. Give us your reaction as to the verdict that was given today.
It's a sad day. It's a sad day. Good morning to you and good morning to the viewers. It's a very sad day for the poor, for the working class of South Africa. And of course, we know that the majority of those workers who are seemingly going to be affected by Oakbay inability to facilitate payments and other transactions via the banking instrument of Bank of Baroda. You know, the vast majority of the workers that face imminent retrenchment are poor black masses of South Africa. Look, we cannot say we are surprised. We know there has been a well-orchestrated, well-funded and sustained agenda and vendetta to antagonize, to demonize, and possibly to even send the Gupta family out of this country. This is the real nature of capitalism, of white capitalism in particular. It is very anti-competitive. hegemonic in its nature. It wants to exist as a monopoly. The cardinal sin that the Gupta family committed in this country was to move into spaces of business and commerce that since 1652 had been well demarcated and reserved for just the white settler colonial minority of South Africa. And it is very shocking how they've even been able, this white monopoly capital section of South Africa, to mobilize even what are supposed to be progressive political leaders of South Africa to gang up against one family whose only sin is to move into spaces that, according to white supremacist outlook, are reserved only for settler colonial whites. Now, it also shows you that, unfortunately, we are still dealing with a black majority that whose consciousness, political consciousness, has not fully awakened. And that is why it is easy, particularly for white media, to flood them with all these stories, distortions, and propaganda and turn them against anybody, not just the Guptas. What this tells you is that in South Africa, white monopoly capital has so much power, even in terms of shaping views and opinions, that tomorrow it could be me. They could easily deploy their media apparatus and cook up a story and sell it and sustain it. And before you know it, I or you or anybody for that matter could have the vast majority of the population turned against them. Well, all is not lost. We are involved in a huge economic warfare in this country. And slowly a lot of people are beginning to realize that actually this is a warfare, economic warfare. This is the ongoing struggle to redistribute the wealth of this country from the white minority, which acquired that wealth through violent means, to the black majority, the rightful owners of this country, this land, the economy, the mines, the banks and farms, and so on and so forth. So the fight must continue.
To move to another phone, but please stay on the line with us. We will be back with you in a few minutes. We are also joined by Black First Land First National convener Andile Mkitama on the phone line. Very good morning to you, Andile, and thank you for joining us here on ANN 7. Well, and like Jackie just said, he said if this could happen, then tomorrow it could be anyone that suddenly could have a bank account closed because of their reputation. What's your thoughts on this?
Yes, the important thing is to recognize that we are in the middle of economic terrorism by white monopoly capital. They are going to do everything, and they are doing everything to make sure that anyone who threatens their interest of holding onto the South African economy as their own is being chased out of the economy, is being destroyed. I think as those of us who think and who know that the enemy is white monopoly capital, it is not the Gupta family, it is not President Zuma. The enemy is those who stole our land. The enemy are those who still have our wealth, the mines, and that is white monopoly capital. Those of us who know this must commend the Gupta family for being resilient. They have been fighting this battle almost alone for quite some time. And then our biggest concern goes to the workers who clearly the court itself did not think they deserve to be protected. Our courts are also under the influence of white monopoly capital. Their first consideration is to protect the interests of white monopoly capital. This must not surprise us because, as we say, those who own the means of production control everything else in society. They control the views, as Brother Jikishan has just said. They control how laws are interpreted. They control the courts. They even control the police. Those who own the means of production in this country is white monopoly capital. Their influence is also monopolistic. In other words, it goes everywhere in society, including in the judiciary itself. Our courts are not aware that they need to protect our people. They're still running under some Roman Dutch law, apartheid thinking. That is why these kinds of decisions are happening. We must not be surprised also if we think the context we find ourselves in today, where, for instance, even auditing firms such as KPMG can lie about its own report, use the media propaganda to protect and to portray its own corruption, its own systematic assault on the democratic order as something which is the responsibility of the Gupta family or the President Zuma. We are in the middle of a war, and our people are not aware, and they are being bamboozled by lies, by propaganda. Today's court decision must make it clear to all of us that if we don't stand together, we're going to lose this war. White monopoly capital is going to reclaim this country everywhere, including politics. But I also agree, the war is not ended. This is not the defeat. The battle still continues. We must take the battle directly to the banks. We must not allow them to shut down these accounts. We must not allow them to punish the workers in their narrow political battle to maintain South Africa as a racist colonial economic structure. We as BLF will be part of this battle and will take this battle to the banks directly.
Expanding on that, saying that you will be part of the battle and not allowing the banks to shut down this bank account, just tell us if there's any action that you are planning to take as the BLF for these workers to help them keep their jobs.
Yes, we were waiting for this court decision. We are having a meeting of national leadership meeting. Will meet tonight. We're going to study further this, and immediately we'll announce actions. But you can be rest assured that we're not going to allow the South African white monopoly capital, which is racist, to succeed in its economic terrorism. This attack on the Gupta family, it is calculated to make sure that no black person, no business person who is not under control of white monopoly capital ever in South Africa attempts transformation. They want to shut us down. They want to terrorize us. They want to frighten everyone into silence and into submission. If we don't stand up and fight this thing, black South Africans can forget about economic transformation. As we speak, we know the mining charter is in front of the courts. The same courts, you see now what white monopoly capital is doing. It runs to court every time when it wants to arrest the transformation agenda because it knows our courts are sympathetic to white monopoly capital. We must refuse that and we must reject it and we must use our numbers. We have the numbers. We might not have the money, but we have the numbers. We have the numbers of our people. We're a black majority. We must mobilize our numbers to shut down the banks, to shut down the mining houses, to make sure that economic transformation happens. Now the battle must go to the streets. The courts are not going to rescue us because the courts themselves are captured by the same interests as those of white monopoly capital.
Well, thank you so much, Andile Mkhitarima, for joining us there on the phone line. I will go back now to Jackie Shandu, political commentator. Jackie, just from you, what do you think, in your opinion, what is Oakbay's way forward since they have lost this interdict today?
Look,
We seem to have some connection problems there. We are trying to get you more reactions on the statement that was just handed down today. Oakbay has lost the interdict against the Bank of Baroda to keep their bank accounts open. The deadline was at the end of this month, so they have lost that interdict. So the bank accounts will be closed, and therefore there are approximately 7,500 jobs that are on the line, and somewhat 30,000 family members of these mine workers. Now, I do have Jackie Shandu still on the phone line. Jackie, once again, just give us your personal opinion on Oakbay's way forward now that they have lost this interdict.
I want to agree strongly with what Andile said, that this is not a battle that must be confined or will necessarily be won within the judicial system, in the courts of the country. We must not also forget that the criminal justice system, in fact, starting with the Constitution of the Republic, the judiciary, and the legal theory and principles that underpin the court system in South Africa, is itself a creation of this white minority that relied on the courts, that anything is the only way, the most effective way of protecting ill-gotten wealth, stolen land, centuries and centuries of exploited black labor which produced white wealth. The most powerful instrument that was going to secure this was the judiciary. And that's why even when you go back to Codesa 1, 2, a lot of tension and disagreements were also largely about the legal system that was going to be part of the democratic dispensation. And it is clear that the liberation movements led by the ANC, who were negotiating in Kodesa, lost this particular battle about the legal system. We are dealing with a judiciary that is completely detached, completely indifferent to the plight of the poorest of the poor in this country. And we must also remember that during apartheid, South Africa was what we called a parliamentary sovereignty. You had a parliament that was the highest law in the land. What that tells you is that apartheid dictators such as de Klerk and Botha were above the courts. Moving into democracy, the same whites say no. Since we anticipate a black majority rule, we cannot afford to have parliament as the supreme law-making body in the country. We must then move this same consent mandate to the courts, constitutional court in particular. So again, these are the limitations of a neoliberal white capitalist democracy that relies firmly on the courts which are largely governed by Roman Dutch law, European jurisprudence, which has nothing to do with Africa and the interests of the African people and the challenges facing the African people. So I agree that let us not reduce this to a narrow legal battle. The corners, all corners of our society, townships, the squatter settlements, rural areas, urban black people need to be mobilized, and they need to be sensitized, conscientized about this war that we are fighting.
Well, Jackie,
the danger is that...
I do have another person on the phone. Please do stay with us. I will come back to you in a few moments. Well, we do have Chepi Masina, councillor of Hendrina Mine, also on the phone line. A very good morning to you, sir, and thank you for joining us here on ANN7. Now, in accordance to the Hendrina Mine, how will this affect those mine workers there that are reliant on the Oakbay, or on Oakbay actually, to give them salaries every month?
Thank you, mainly, I will speak about the community at large, the community of KwaZulu in Hendrina, which is being supplied water of high potential quality by Optimum. I would say they are going to be really affected in case we are going to be having a situation whereby they are being not continue to be supplied with that water. They are going to be really affected, very, very affected. I would say, well, in case there's a problem between the banks and the company, then when towards that solutions and all the proceedings, I would say let it not affect the general communities. They may not know what has led to what the quandary that we find ourselves in now, generally. But then the people, look, 7,000 workers, employees of the company are going to be retrenched. Then what do you say? Are those employees' lives less important than the works of the bank, of which they are profiteering, the banks? But then what about 7,000 people? Then I would say, well, the ruling, we respect our judiciary, there's nothing we can do. But then I would like to say, let us not have a trend and tendency of affecting the people with problems with affecting companies and leadership or whatsoever at the high level. Let the general public not be affected, especially in such a brutal way. I think the government needs to come close and intervene in this regard, because this process is leading to a negative impact in the general community of KwaZulu, the general society. Then what do you say?
Well, thank you so much, Chepi Masina, councillor of Hendrina Mine. I want to go back to Jackie Shanda, our political commentator on the phone line. I do have a question for you. The applicants have not pleaded under Section 34. That is what was stated by the judge. What does that mean exactly for the viewers? Let's clear it up.
So please repeat the question.
Well, I am asking the applicants, the judge has said that the applicants have not pleaded under Section 34 of the Constitution. What does that mean?
Well, I mean, it means very little, to be quite honest, in terms of what is at stake here. here is what is wrong with our law schools in this country, or in fact, the education system as a whole, particularly higher education, is that it does not allow students to critically engage with the Constitution, with statutory law, whatever it may be. So what ends up happening is that we produce professionals that seem to think that we worship the Constitution as a people. We must serve the Constitution. When it is actually the other way around, we make laws that serve us, that service us, that enable us to progress as a people. So that is why even the previous speaker, you say we respect our judiciary, because this is what we are fed. This is how we are indoctrinated, that the law is above all else and is even above us. No matter how backward, how reactionary it may be, no matter how much it can be an impediment, a stumbling block to our own march forward as a people. And we need to, hence we strongly support even the call by the students of today for decolonization of the curriculum, particularly at university, because we need to produce African professionals, black professionals and entrepreneurs that will understand that come what may, nothing supersedes the ongoing struggle for total liberation of the black majority. So, of course, the judges, as supposed experts, on the Constitution, on the democracy, they are able to just pull out any section of the Constitution and rely on it. And we are saying, for the critical scholar, for the critical activist, for a black conscious citizen of this country, we first need to understand that nothing supersedes the interest of the black majority.
Jackie, I do have to ask you again to just stay on the line for us. We have another person on the phone line, President of the South African National Mining Council, Ben Setlhaono, joining us on the phone line. A very good morning to you, sir. Let's just get your reaction, your general reaction as to what happened in court today and the interdict being lost by Oakbay.
Good day and to your listeners at home as well. Look, we expected that the court, they are not going to rule in the favor of the poor in this country. Remember, if you recall, the South African Constitution is governed by three spheres, which is the judicial, the parliament, and the executive. Now, if the executive is under attack and the parliament is under attack, if you are looking at a lot of cases that the DA are pumping over the court, they are confusing the judicial, because in every case they are taking to court in order to, by making sure that their voice are going ahead. Now, the mass democratic movement are only for two people, the poor and the middle class. If you do not care about the poor and the middle class, who are you representing? You are representing none, because we cannot be run by white monopoly capital. Because if you take all our resources out of the country without any beneficiation, and then our people must suffer for the consequences that they didn't done, and for the fact that this matter is being brought before the court, but it affects the poor, to the judge, it is meaningless. And we do not expect the favor from the judge, but we wanted an honest judgment with regard to safeguard the interest of the majority in this country. And the majority of this country are suffering because of they do not raise their voice. That's why we said we have to come up with the mechanism to go back to the street. That's the only way, because our executive does not have much power. They are powerless. Our parliament, they have done the law. They don't have power any longer because this white monopoly capital, they are putting a lot of pressure to our government. So we are left with only one institution, which is judicial. But when you look at more cases that are pumping in to the judiciary, they want to make sure that at the end of the day, they are going to say the judicial system of South Africa needs to be reviewed because they do not handle correctly their interests.
Now, when we did hear earlier from one of our phoners, Chepi Masina, he phoned in and he said that it is not just the mine workers that's going to be affected by this, but also whole communities. He is from Hendrina. Now, do you think that we can allow the financial institutions such a broad blanket of protection from scrutiny? And why should these financial systems be treated differently from other institutions in the country? Can they just wash their hands clean from these workers and their job losses?
We cannot hold our arms and say everything is fine because, yes, you are right. It's not only the mine workers. Because remember, all those mine workers, wherever they stay, they contribute towards the GDP. They are paying tax from the revenue collection of this country. And also, these workers, they are also paying services such as water, electricity, and so on. It's not only that the workers only, they also their families and extended families who are going to be highly affected in this matter. But the court, they could have, when they came out with a judgment, that judgment could have been holistically resolving all the matters because when we grow up, they said we must be sober like a judge. When you are a judge, when you've got matters before you, you must not only look at the one side of the story. You must try to look at the balance because these poor workers, they have did nothing wrong. They did not know their employer. They employ them where they get their money. And when you are going to close those mines and those people, where they gonna get the employment? We have 35% unemployment rate in the country, and then are we continuing to say we must keep on reducing the number of the unemployment in the country because of the selfishness of the people who have an interest in our economy? We cannot run this country like that. It is for that reason I'm saying this issue that we are having, this is not only our matter. This is a matter to the DA, is a matter to the EFF, is a matter to the UDM, is a matter to the COPE. But they do as if this matter is only the matter to the ruling party. And they take an advantage that there is an infight in the ruling party.
Now, Ben, let me just ask you, if we take a look at the arguments made by the Bank of Baroda, they said that they want to close the account due to adverse publicity around them, which to Oakbay replied saying that the bank is relying on invalid, irrational and unlawful grounds in its assessment. Looking at this argument, can we say that we're getting a sense that the court based its verdict on the public perception and not on actual facts?
Basically, they have no authority to do so. They have no authority to do so. But we need a government that can outspoken and say enough is enough. because when these people went to the poll and vote for this government, they vote for this government because they have believed that this government, they are going to carry some of their interest. And then what it means when the bank closed this account, they close one of these voters out because all these mine workers, some of them or many of them, they have contributed towards this government of, I don't know how to call it, a government of national unity or a multi-party government. But the fact remains is that this political party system, it has allowed the ANC to lead as a majority party. The issue that we are suffering at the moment is the infight that are in the ANC, because these people, they are taking an advantage that there is infight in the ANC, and the white monopoly capital are capitalizing on those mistakes. Look, the order of the court, they have checked that they get more pressure from this white monopoly capital, this white monopoly party that are in government, in parliament. They are putting pressure on the ruling party, and then they make a fear to the judge, to the judge, so that when the judge makes a judgment, he must also listen to the opposition party, because they are the one who says this and this. They do not go according to their expectation, and so on and so on, without knowing that the people who are going to suffer, or the people who are suffering more on this matter, are the poor of this country.
Well, thank you so much to Ben Sedhano, the president of SA's National Mining Council, joining us there on the phone line. Also joining us on the phone line is political analyst Tshepo Gadima. Thank you so much for joining us, Tshepo. Now, let's start with the court. In its verdict, it says that there was no recognized cause of action for an interim interdict. What do you think about this statement made by the court?
That is certainly a misapplication of the law, as well as a miscarriage of justice. We have to bear in mind that our courts, stroke the judiciary, are one branch of the state which is subject to the Constitution with the other two branches of the state. But very importantly, under our Constitution, and I mention the Constitution because this case by Oakbay companies against Bank of Baroda, the heart, the core of it is constitutional rights of citizens, ordinary citizens. Now, the courts are in their task of interpreting or applying any law, that they are enjoined in duty to ensure that every judgment or order that they make should, at all material times, in context and purpose, give effect to the fundamental rights contained in the Bill of Rights of our Constitution. Because in order for the Bill of Rights to remain a living document in the eyes of all citizens and ensure that the courts can be legitimate, the Constitution itself can be seen to be indifferent and neutral, not partisan, it is important that the courts do this. So my reading is that today what we have seen, effectively, Judge Fabricius, it can be argued, successfully so, that he violated the Constitution. He did not uphold the Constitution. Because when you read or you listen to his reading of paragraph 43 of his judgment, you can't help but be left with that one conclusion, that he did not apply the Constitution. He did not provide or give clarity as to what happens to the 7,000 plus people who are reliant on the Constitution to uphold and promote their rights. And those rights can only be upheld and promoted by the state, and the courts are a branch of the state, therefore enjoined in duty. So if anything, I believe that South Africans really need to rise up, because when injustice becomes law, resistance is duty. And when the courts themselves violate the law, we then have to rise up, because it brings us to an element where we'll be self-help if the Constitution cannot be sufficient to protect the rights of ordinary citizens. And today it was indeed a miscarriage of justice.
When we take a look at the judgment that was made, they also rely on the FIC certificate, which was declared invalid on those 72 suspicious transactions, so to say, against Oakbay companies. Now, do you think that the verdict citing this public protector report was correct?
Well, the North Gauteng High Court in Pretoria finds itself in a very invidious position, because every judgment that is delivered from that court at all material times now has to receive higher scrutiny for no other reason other than that the judge president of that very high court has previously admitted that he had knowledge of or information of some of his judges who had either been financially induced or in one shape or another bribed. So we have to ask, under the current environment in South Africa, that is Judge Fabricius not having been unduly pressurized from other quarters? We have to bear in mind that the moneyed corporations have had vested interest in this matter of violating the constitutional rights of citizens, and they showed that they will go to all lengths to ensure that citizens' rights are violated and the Constitution itself is no longer relevant to ordinary people. So therefore we have to ask, was the judge put under undue pressure? What are the financial affairs of the judge that made him to, in this case, overlook in his judgment, as it would appear, and paragraph 43 that he read clearly tells us the rest of his judgment would show that he overlooked a very material fact and more so constitutional. As to how the FIC certificate had any relevance, it is beyond us, because that certificate was dismissed previously by the very same court and a full bench for that matter. So it is flabbergasting, to say the least, that the judge found it relevant. But we have to now ask bigger questions as to what, are there any other vested interests that might have reached out to the judge to persuade him not to uphold the Constitution, and he did not uphold the Constitution, specifically the Bill of Rights, Chapter 2 of our Constitution, because now you have got citizens. Because a banking account, it is fundamental, it is within the Bill of Rights. Therefore, you cannot have dispossession. And his judgment today, unfortunately, has got the consequence of bringing about a liquidation of valuable company with many employees through the back door. How can the courts be allowed to preside over injustice and the violation of the Constitution? So therefore, resistance is now duty amongst many South Africans when our courts themselves fail to understand and their duty and obligation towards the Constitution.
Well, thank you so much to political analyst Tsepo Khadima joining us there on the phone line. I want to go back to our political commentator, Jackie Shandu. He is still on the phone line with us. Jackie, just your closing thoughts on this matter as for the people and the public watching.
Well, I want to reiterate that this Constitution 108 of 1996 in South Africa, Tsepo speaks of the Bill of Rights, Chapter 2 of the Constitution. Within the Bill of Rights, you have what are referred to as socio-economic rights, which speaks to the rights of all South Africans to have access to adequate housing, to health care, to education. This Constitution comes into effect in 1996. We are in the year 2017. More than 20 years later, the vast majority of black people in this country are without access to adequate housing, are without access to adequate health care, are without access to education, hence the emergence of the movement Fees Must Fall. So what I'm trying to demonstrate is that this is supposedly an internationally acclaimed constitution. Progressive and so on and so forth, only because it guarantees, it secures, it protects primarily the rights, the interests of those who were beneficiaries of colonialism and apartheid, and that is the white settler colonial minority of South Africa. As to the multitudes, the tens of millions of the black majority, this constitution does absolutely nothing. There is a very big case that every law student in this country has gone through, the state versus Makwanyan. Grootboom, rather, the state versus Grootboom, Mama Grootboom, who died without a house, and she had been fighting for so long just to get an RDT house. It's a very old case. It's a very popular case that is studied across law schools in this country. However, it is merely academic and theoretical.
Well, thank you so much, Jackie, for joining us on the phone line. That was Jackie Shande, political commentator. We will have to continue our discussion a bit later. Thank you for joining us on the phone line, and thank you for all our callers for giving your input on this verdict.